Give them a couple more minutes to arrive, and then we'll.
In the meantime.
One, so we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've just been advised that Evan is going to be a few minutes late, so we'll just go ahead and let him get here as best as he can through the traffic, but I don't want to hold up everybody's day as we begin this. So let's go ahead and let's just get started if we can. And so what I'd like to do is call this meeting to order at 3:32, and let's take a roll call. So I would leave it to staff to start that roll call, please.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Jack Hilbert,
Here?
James Eklund,
Here, online.
thank you. Don Langley. Here. Clark Hamelman,
Kevin Rance filling in for Clark.
Kevin Rance, thank you. Jim Mraz,
Here.
Roger Hudson,
Here.
Frank Johns,
I'm here.
Evan Ela will be late, so we'll note the time that he arrives. Harold Smithos,
Here.
Tauntaun,
Here.
Tricia Bernhardt,
Here.
thank you.
You got everything you need, ma'am?
It is, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So looking at the next item on our agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from the last meeting. So if everybody's had an opportunity to review those, if there's any corrections, please look to be called on, and we'll get those in there. Okay, look for a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Abstentions? Okay, let's move forward then. The next item on this will be member discussion. We're trying to limit this to about 10 minutes, but we don't have to because it's us. So anyhow, if there's anything general on something that's not on the agenda, and I think the agenda item is right there, is to go over the subcommittee's report, and we'll be talking about that. So let's please hold all discussion on that later. But if there's any other items any member on the commission would like to discuss. Yes, Tricia?
Just real quickly, I have been asked by a lot of members of the public if they can't, if we as the Douglas County Water Commission couldn't hold a public hearing of some kind to allow them to speak their mind about public and water issues.
Okay.
I know that, we haven't had time to let people talk at the end of these sessions, but there has been a general request really from at least a half a dozen people that I've talked to that would like to talk about what matters to them in terms of water issues in Douglas County. And I know that we're not at a point where we can have a public discussion on information that we found, but perhaps as we're going forward and producing the RFP, maybe there is an opportunity or a time when we could let the public come and talk about the things they'd like to see in the water plan. I just think it's important to let people speak their mind on these issues.
Any other discussion or response on Tricia's comments?
I mean, the next meeting may be a good time because we're not going to have much because we're going to be waiting for proposals, really. If we get the RFPs approved today. But, I mean, that could be good because there may not be much else. And the RFP will help tell the public what we're planning on doing.
Anybody else? Harold?
Yeah, it really is. It's a listening session. We don't have that much to present, but allowing people to speak their mind and say, what they would like to see come out of the water plan, what their concerns are. It is, I think, always healthy to let people speak.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea personally, and I think we can make that happen next time we set the agenda. We'll watch the timing on items, so whenever the timing is appropriate, and we'll do then is set that in there. And just as a note, Evan, how you doing, guy? And so then we can have them do it, because I think it's a great idea. One thing for sure, if people are wanting to, and they're feeling a need to be able to, it's a little awkward for them to go to the commissioners and speak in front of them when this is probably the best place to do that. And so, yeah, we'll make a time and then allow them to work in that. And then, so I do. That's a great opportunity. Plus, I think we want to publish it, giving them an opportunity just to come and talk, As long as there's no signs and pitchforks, we'll be okay. So,
Sometimes there are.
there we are. Any rate, anybody else? So if you could put that on the parking lot and make sure that we catch that, okay, Katie? Thank you. All righty. Not seeing anybody else, we'll move forward with our agenda, which is discussion on the action items. So I just want to remind the board where we're at, and I just want to get you up to speed on what's happened in the last month. And so then we can all begin to kind of kick it off. But the first thing I would like to do is just say thank you very much to Tricia, Sean, and Don. You guys put in some extra work on this thing and some extra thought, and I know it goes a long ways in helping the rest of us at least have a good spot to do this thing and get it done in the right manner. And so I really appreciate all that you've done. I don't think your job's done yet, but however, I appreciate where we're at this point in time. I did have an opportunity to speak at length with Don as we set up the agendas and working forward with the agenda and looking at what we're doing. So there are going to be some discussion items today that we're going to have to get around, and that is going to be, how do we want to approach this beast? Because quite frankly, you're going to hear from the subcommittee, and what I would like to do probably is get your thoughts together. I know it's quick notice, but probably just have the subcommittee give out a report on their activities, their thoughts, their reasoning, and the why, and let them manage that into the commission, and then we can have that general discussion. I think would be the best way to handle it. We won't miss anything that way. The only thing I would say is just a couple of items that we want to look at is that some of this can get really, really super complicated. I don't know how deep we want to go. It's ours, so we need to figure that out and then drive it through that way. I do know we want to try to keep, at least for the commissioner's standpoint, something simple that they can issue, and then we'll go from there. So we'll give some feedback when that time comes. So at this point, I'd like to do is just turn this over, and let me remind everybody what it was. It was to take a look at the draft RFP, to sit down and to add to that, edit it, take some authorship, and discuss what they think needs to be in there based upon some of the input we got from the commission the last time, and then incorporate that, and then add their own observations, and then from that, come out with what might be a recommended driving point on that. I don't know if we're going to walk out of here with an RFP that's done. I really don't think we are, to be honest with you. I think we're going to walk out with a fairly closed one, and hopefully at least get that together, and then we can come up with a 95% done document for the next trip around and say, okay, now we're going to approve this so the staff can issue it and then go out following state law on how to issue those RFPs and do what they have to do. All right, with that, I would like to turn this over and let the three of you arm wrestle as to how you want to address this, if there's one person, or do we just go around to start a general discussion, and how do you guys want to do that?
Yeah, I think, and this is where I was kind of wrestling in my head, so we don't get into kind of the last meeting where we're going through each section and recreating, and just
Yeah,
kind of remind everyone, we took a phased approach, as Don laid out in our last meeting. And so huge kudos to the staff, because they winnowed down the document we worked on, and it was a living document. So in real time, we had Tricia making comments, and Don was making comments, and I was jumping in and back and forth, and having conversations about what should be and should not be in it. We don't need to rehash all of that, but I was thinking if we can maybe get through the document, and if everyone has an area of concern or they need explanation from us, maybe we can answer how we came to that. And then the question I'm still wrestling with in my mind is, this is a phased approach, but I heard it in the last meeting, we want to take a total package to the commissioners, so we're not going back multiple times asking for funding requests. So I think having some intentionality around what are we submitting for the RFP, and how do we submit for the total package dollar amount, and this is going to be broken up, even though I guess everything we have in here that's not phase one, we can throw over into phase two. I'm looking at the former commissioner for guidance here, so that we can just get this all approved at once, and we're not having to, go back and forth with the commissioners, over the next 9 months.
So if I can, let me just try to get into that a little bit and then open this up for discussion on the phased approach. There's complicated areas within this, like a lot of people talked about they wanted to do a groundwater analysis. Then there was a gap analysis that they thought might be appropriate, hiring engineers to get that done, a solution portion of that. And then there was, all right, what about the rural area analysis only? What about the number of wells? And how do we get that? By the way, just as a kick of fun, I just saw this today. There's the wells, so good luck. But yeah, that is funny. But what it does do, it actually shows you the nature of the issue. I mean, it really does. If you look at this map and say, whoa. But so the phases, let's just keep this in mind. What we can do is one document, but break it up into chapters. This is that simple, which basically says, okay, we know we got to get this portion done, but they need to know that by this, other part, we also want this and we want that. I think we should ask for it all, find out what it's going to cost, and then we can, if it's something the commissioners feel is way more than what they wanted to bite off, then we can begin to phase out or work out which items of those chapters to take away. So I would agree with you on that, Sean, and we can address that. So let's turn it, Dawn and Tricia.
Let me give you a real quick high level. Everybody, what you have in front of you are actually two RFPs, and we broke it out that way because These are really different lanes and practices of what consultants do. There are planning consultants out there that can really help us put together a really great inventory and a planning document and looking at policy in future. They are not necessarily geohydrologists who can do groundwater modeling and really assess the groundwater situation. In our opinion, the three of us, as we worked on it, decided that these are really different consultants. I know that may present a problem, and maybe the answer is one consultant who then has a subcontract with a geohydrologist to do the groundwater modeling, but they're very different requests of what we're looking at, trying to solve the issue here. That's why you're seeing two different RFPs in front of you.
Don?
Yeah, audio okay?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So, thank you for letting us work on this. It was a lot of fun, right? Yes. So the subcommittee was presented with a starting draft that came from the staff in April, so that was the work that had been done at that point, and gave us the opportunity to try and work and develop that further. I'll say what is before you in the document, and in my opinion, it's not a proposal for the final RFP, but rather it's a lot more developed version of it for consideration by the full council or commission. I think everybody needs to weigh in on that. In my thinking, it's maybe 70% complete, so maybe in a football analogy, we're on the 30-yard line now. So we're moving the ball, for sure. There was discussion at the agenda review meeting that Jack has with staff that I was allowed to sit in on. Two recommendations came out of that for consideration by the commission. One was, I think staff and Jack at that time were favoring that we do a one RFP. That two is going to maybe be too difficult. And then the other discussion we had was about the phases. And the document that we have, we broke that, I think that worked out into 3 phases. And maybe a way to approach this is to think about 2 phases, with the first phase being, all that stuff that's in the document now, other than the groundwater supply study. And then the second phase would be the groundwater supply study. The pace, I think, of the groundwater analysis would be different. I think we want to take more time. We want to be more thoughtful. It's very complicated, right? 8,500 wells, all that goes with that. So the notion of having it in a separate task, or maybe on a separate timeline, ultimately to inform and be part of the plan, but still be separate. That's kind of where we landed with that and where that recommendation is. I would say that we didn't reach a consensus on the section that's titled Water Supply Information, which is on the first page in Phase 1. And it's not that it's wrong, but it's significantly different than what was done in the El Paso study and what we think they're doing in the Arapahoe study. It doesn't really particularly mirror what was done there, so we lose that opportunity to kind of replicate what we talked about, trying to replicate the El Paso model. And it really represents, the work looks like it represents a pretty large undertaking. So we didn't reach consensus with that. The intent and method of developing the gap analysis, I use that term with capital letters because I think there's a model before us that we can use. That looks pretty good to me. I think it looked pretty good to the committee. It may need some clarification and maybe a little bit of further comment. The expectations, the plan development expectations section looks okay at the summary level. It's kind of got the high points of the things that we'd like to try and achieve with the plan. But it could probably be further developed, maybe clarified a little bit too. The section that was labeled plan should include. I think that needs a full commission review to really understand what's in there. It doesn't line up with what the other counties have done. So again, that doesn't mean that we can't do what's drafted in the plan. I'm just saying that it's quite a bit different than what we saw El Paso do and what we think Arapahoe's doing. Arapahoe's not quite as clear. They're still in the middle of theirs, and of course, Elbert's just getting started. So I think we need to wrestle with that a little bit more. I think we all struggle with wrestling with what's going to be in the RFP and then what's going to be in the plan. And in my thinking, those are maybe not the same thing. Those are two different things. And then Sean mentioned the groundwater analysis as being a separate RFP. The wording of that is, I would describe it as trying to take this maybe fresh approach to how do we go about doing a groundwater analysis. And we're talking about trying to put, to tag, I'll say, groundwater availability. I mean, how much water's there? What's the availability today? Where do we think it's going? And, what are we going to have? What's availability going to be in the future? That's not like the Holy Grail, right? That is a big step. Probably the hardest thing that we're probably going to try and undertake, but maybe the most important thing that we're also going to undertake. So that's why it felt, at least to me, I won't speak for Tricia and Sean, but at least to me, that it deserved to kind of stand alone and be and get focus on it directly. So that's kind of what I saw. Maybe Tricia would like to follow up with that, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Let's hear what other people have to say.
Sean?
Nothing to add, just the last part. I mean, that's the $1,000 question.
Yeah.
That everyone, whether you live in Highlands Ranch or you live in Larkspur, is wanting to know is what's the health of the aquifers and how much more time do we have?
Yeah. Where's the stress?
Roger?
I'm really interested to know, I guess, Roger Hudson from Castle Pines, really interested in the one comment. I have questions about everything you said, but the comment about water supply, that was where you all diverged. So where did you diverge? That seems like one of the major things in the water plan. We want to know what is the water supply in Douglas County. So where did you disagree?
Don Langley. When I said water supply, I was talking about the section in the RFP that's titled Water Supply Information Collection. So that is gathering data, review and evaluation of the supply plans for the water providers, water supply profile. It's a lot of information that's different than in the gap analysis, where in the gap analysis, we're going to have the water providers tell us, what supply they got now, what supply they think they're going to need in the future, what their growth looks like, and where we stand collectively, in 20 or 30 years. So embedded in the gap analysis is indeed getting at those figures, getting at those numbers of this is the water supply today, here's what the water providers can do, here's what we think people are taking from private wells, we add that in too, and then we project that out for 30 years based on what the water providers have in their plans. And if they don't have plans, some will, some won't, then we'd ask, I'll say the consultant to try and find whatever information they can about those areas that don't have well-articulated plans to try and to fill in that part of the analysis. So it is a water supply study. When I say water supply, though, it's that specific section in the RFP right now has a lot of gathering of information and data and profiles and stuff from water providers that I don't know that we need, in my opinion. I think we know a lot about the water providers and what their systems look like, and it would be a lot of work, I think.
So the disagreement was just in the gathering of the information, is what you're saying to me. Some of it's already
Yeah.
gathered. Is that the point?
That's how I would read it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't know where it all is, so I think we need to gather it all and put it in one place, and so that's where some of this detail came from.
So it's just in the gathering, and whether or not it's all correct, what's been given to us. Okay.
Yeah,
Is there a
Trish, I
price
think-
tag on it?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. That's what we don't know right now. Trish, that's exactly where I'm at, because I'm looking at this and said, okay, at the end, who assembles this and in what order and in what process? But the problem is, I think there's no doubt, we know we need it all in order to come up with and wrestling with what the county, I think, wrestles with as a whole. When you start doing developments, it's what is the right answer? And there's other things I think that sometimes commissioners take in considerations. I'm just going to throw it out there, is that when you start putting a water demand of, I'm just going to use this as an example, please, 0.75 on a renewable water source, when you're only using 0.25 as an example, well, you're taking 3 times the amount of water that's needed out of the marketplace, which then drives up the water in the marketplace to the sky. And then all of a sudden that water is not being used, so it's left in the river. And then all that really means is then, okay, it's being called and used downstream by somebody else, and it goes on and on and on. That's renewable water sources. And it drives up the cost of the water, which inevitably is paid for by the homeowners and the users of that water, and it's driven to them. And so with enough information, we'll be able to start getting some of that determination as to what is the renewable. And that's one thing I don't know. I've always wondered as a commissioner, how much really are we using, how much renewable water are we using out there, you know? And as we look at that, so I think it's going to be the whole study coming together and getting all that information. And I'll be honest, it's my concern. I think we need to ask the commissioners to take one shot and let that consultant, and there's got to be a consulting firm out there that's able to manage and coalesce another entity and just say, okay, you're going to do this and we're going to hire you to do that. It's common practice in a lot of industries to do that. You have subs and other people respond to one section of an RFP and give you the data you need in order to drive it together. And so then they coalesce it and bring it together for a whole document. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that was my thought. And to get this thing moving, because what's going to be difficult to me is that what if we've got conflicting data? The other thing that really bothers me too, and we need to make sure we call it out, is SWMSWA's doing their study right now. They're updating everything, which is going to be pretty big effort on their part, and that's all the providers though. Well, it would not be good if our data was in conflict with their data. We need to get that resolved only from the standpoint of, okay, now who's pointing fingers at who and why? So that's part of that coordination effort. We need to try to make sure that we're getting the same data from the water providers in this bid. So, Frank, you had a question or something?
Yeah, I mean, I like that, you know, the hydrogeologist is separate for the groundwater analysis because it is different. It could be a sub-consultant, but if it is, that better be named in the proposal, and that is going to be, you know, one of the factors in terms of, you know, the selection. But that was, you know, part of what I was seeing as the RFP for the groundwater analysis talked about a 3-year period. I mean, you can't do phase 3 until the groundwater analysis is done, because that is needed to complete phase 1. Phase 2 can be done separately, so those 1 and 2 can be done at the same time. But I mean, I personally thought these were pretty close to being final. I mean, I don't have any major, you know, comments other than that, is that there's coordination and maybe the timing of the groundwater analysis is something. On the groundwater analysis portion, Centennial Water and Sand District for Highlands Ranch is looking into installing some monitoring wells around, you know, some of their wells they pump, just to, you know, see what goes on in those aquifers. And, you know, that's going to be important. It'd be nice if, you know, some of the other large entities would help out that way, or, you know, we'd get county funding or whatever. But, I mean, that's what's going to be needed, is really seeing how the groundwater, you know, reacts to pumping, because most of the time we're just monitoring, you know, in the same well. So.
Yes, Jim?
Yeah, Jim Morris. So to kind of follow up on Frank, so our district down there in Larkspur, I think, is a good example. You know, we're able to rest some of our wells, so we get pretty good data because we're not pumping them all the time. So you're going to have conflicting data because our stuff is not going to look like Highlands Ranch because we're not pumping them 100% times a day. Our wells recover, and I think you're going to see some areas, and we've got pretty good data down there. The last 3 years here have been relatively wet. Some of our deep wells have actually went up. Water levels are up. So people screaming that the aquifers are going dry, they're going up down there. We're getting ready to drill another well, 1,600 feet, 20-inch hole. It's almost $2 million. And, we're looking forward to having, a good well is going to give us 150 gallons a minute. So it's pretty expensive water, but we don't think our aquifers are going down.
See, that's the kind of data that we got to get from all of the providers. One of the things I don't know, and Trish, I'm looking at you at this one maybe a little bit, is, and I'm just trying to drive conversation with these questions, by the way, is we've got so many wells, residential wells punched down there. I mean, 8,500 wells, obviously. I would be bet that there's probably not 200 provider wells out there, although they're big and they're deep and they're all over the place. But these wells, I don't know how we go about unless it's a recommendation from somebody. And maybe we put that into the RFP about if you're going to do a well analysis, what would be your recommendation for how to complete that study? It could be as much as coming back with that approach and that says, okay, we're going to have to either punch a couple wells someplace or ask to piggyback a well and monitor that well. I mean, that's what the GEO, I think it's GEO, the group that has been doing the analysis, they do, is they've got some wells they've been picked out and people are participating. So I don't know how we're going to go about that, but I think that's the kind of thing we have to look at.
Jack, there are a lot of entities that are collecting well data. I don't think there's any need to put in a new well somewhere to monitor it. But that is part of what needs to be done, is gathering that all together, all the different entities, whether it's Castle Rock Water, whether it's USGS, and the work that the Rural Water Authority of Douglas County has been doing with the USGS. CSU has been doing some monitoring, Division of Water Resources, the Office of the State Engineer. So there's just a lot of people that have some data. Again, I think from a consultant, when we ask for a proposal, if a consultant can come back to us with some ideas of this is how I would do it, this is how I would gather the data here and here and here and here, and this is how we would do these inputs, and this is how we would do some groundwater modeling, that would be helpful to hear back from them. I personally am a little concerned about pushing this out too far to try to get the RFP perfect. I'd like to see an RFP go to some of these consultants, let them come back to us. We don't even need to have a formal proposal. We could ask for them to come and provide ideas to us, and then we could select from there. That's one thought that I had, rather than trying to get the RFP perfect, because we're never going to get it perfect with 12 people in this room.
Good point. Roger?
My hope is that this is the county's water plan, and I don't even know that it's a plan as much as it's a receptacle, a living document of where our water is. Was the Bible for where our water is in Douglas County. That it is a place where we can, maybe it's a computer model, whatever it is, where we can go and refer back. The one place that is the true place where the water of Douglas County lives. That's my hope, that we continually update and place where we know the water lives and grows, whether it's renewables or wells or the groundwater. So I definitely am with you. I would rather do it sooner than later, and hear from experts that would do the work to tell us how they would like to formulate that plan and come pitch us their ideas, maybe some more groundbreaking than I could come up with on how to do it. I would like to maybe hear about dollar amounts before we go to commissioners, and put dollars to these things when we propose them. But again, we keep restricting ourselves to what limitations we put on it, where I would like us to be the water of record in Douglas County, not it be a district. I would like them to come to Douglas County to find out where the water is. And I would like for us to shoot for that.
Harold?
I could not agree more with what Roger just said. I'm tired of everybody else defining what our water supply is. I was at a Museum of Nature and Science the other day. They had that program. Everybody was there. They said, well, the aquifer in Douglas County is between 100 and 200 feet deep. It's declining at 5 feet per year. Do the math. That's their water supply. Well, that doesn't say anything except it scares people. And we need to define ourselves what our water supply is. And unless we know what the water supply is, the rest of the study is kind of squishy at best. So I admire the group, Don and Sean and Tricia, for breaking it out. We need to know what the water supply is. Once we understand the aquifer best, then we can make plans and we can present where we are. Now, maybe we do it, Jack, as you suggested, where you have a kind of a master planner and then they sub it out. I don't know. That's what Arapahoe seemed to do with LRE. I think it could work. But I think we need our own study, and I have several suggestions on it. Number one, it needs to be a fresh look. And I think we should limit the water supply study to those engineering companies that have not been integrally involved with the county in policy and planning over a period of years. Let's get a fresh look. It doesn't mean they can't have done business in the county. It's just they shouldn't be part and parcel of what we have. In my business, we change auditors every few years just to get a fresh look, and it works every time. So I think that should be number one. Number two, I think what we need to do is look at it. We are come up with a 20-50-year plan. We should look in slices of 30, 40, and 50. What do they think the aquifer will perform like in those years? And given the growth that we have. And I think that should be part of it. I think a third, there should be an area breakdown, and a aquifer breakdown. It's fundamentally different when we're looking at the Arapahoe than we are Dawson or Denver. So what do we anticipate the water supply in those areas? Because particularly our rural water, they're in the Dawson and Denver, and here we're letting big production wells go in. Wait a minute, let's take a look at that. So 3 things. And at the end of the day, I compliment the county for their margin A, B, and C. I think that's a great start, but I don't think there's 3 areas. I think there's probably 8 or 9. When you superimpose the reliability of the aquifer and the quality of the aquifer. More and more we're seeing radium in certain amounts, which may disqualify those. So I think if we have those things with an area breakdown, a fresh look of the aquifer first, phased over 20 years, 30, 40, and 50, because that's our job, and defining the gap, and then break it down by aquifer as well as region, and identify high-risk areas, much as Arapahoe County did. Remember, they drew the red line after those homes went dry? I don't want to wait for homes to go dry. So those would be my change, but I compliment the committee. I think the subgroup, breaking this out between what have we got in the aquifer, because if we know we've got in the aquifer, then that drives everything else. So that would be my recommendation. I think we're closer to the 20 or 15 yard line if we do those. And my sense of it is, if we can come up with some basic agreement on some parameters, we can share individually from staff and do these things without creating a meeting. Or do we have to worry about that? If 3 of us get together to talk about it, is that a public meeting? Or no? Or can we kibitz on this over the internet?
I would say we're striving to abide by the open meetings law. So
Okay.
if 3 or more of you are meeting together, that should be something that at least people should know about so that they can listen in
Staff can coordinate. We go back and forth with them and come up with their finished product. So that'd be my recommendation. Thank you.
Evan. Okay.
Just a couple of comments. I agree with Harold on the idea of a fresh look and trying to quantify the aquifer. But I think a key part of that is the demand, is the historic demand and the trending demand. And I think a key part that I didn't see in the information we want to get from the water suppliers is an idea of their winter use versus their summer use. Because it kind of gets to the point you were making about whether you're hoarding 0.75 acre feet per household, when in fact, through most of the year, it's only using 0.2. And it's the trend going down, because I think absolutely is going down.
Hey, Evan, can you turn your mic on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Hey, hold on to it.
Yeah, all right, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So what I was trying to say was the water demand, which this data sheet to gather information from the water suppliers is important. But I think we do need to see what their winter demand is versus their summer demand so that you can get an idea, really maybe, of the amount of outside use that's going on in some of these districts, maybe more than others. And then the second thing is it's mentioned, but it's not information requested from the water suppliers, and maybe it should be, which would be their storage entitlements. How much do they rely on stored water? Or do they have stored water entitlements that they intend to rely on? I think groundwater is obviously an analysis we need, but I think surface water storage is also a part of the analysis. You know, there's obviously the obvious reservoirs are Reuter Hess and Chatfield, maybe Cherry Creek to some degree, but there may be others and other sites that could be developed. And I think what component of this water demand is being met by storage is a key question as well.
Sean?
Yeah, I think, Sean Tonner, I think Frank made a great point when he talked about, you know, there's going to be things that when we're going out collecting data, it's also going to show us what data doesn't exist out there. And so I think after our consultant goes out, pulls everything together, gives us a plan, we're also going to have probably about 20 or 30 or 50, hopefully not too much more than that, of huge gaps where we have no data or we're flying blind. And I think that will also aid the commissioners as well as this commission to say, okay, resources should be spent, you know, developing a plan to collect data here so that at the end of the day, our residents can go to sleep at night knowing that they have a solid water supply.
Comments? Well, I am, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I'll throw out some data on the winter use down there in Larkspur. Our winter use is literally 25% of the summer use. So we're running wide open July and August, and the other 6 months during the winter, we're at 25% of what our pumping is during those hot summer months. Now there's some people that have really nice yards. We limit irrigation to 1,200 square feet down there, so they're not irrigating a lot, but there is some. And, since I've been on the board down there, I think 6 years now, we've literally doubled our rates, actually more than doubled. And so you'll see that, I think, in this study, that as rates increase, water consumption drops. People just quit using the water because it gets to be too expensive. And that's been my comment about out in the area down there, is when the yards quit looking like the golf course, we know we've got our rates high enough. And that'll help the conservation effort.
Okay, so I'm going to just
one quick follow-up comment.
Evan, go ahead.
I think that's a very good point about the rates, and that's another question that maybe wasn't asked in this survey and should be added, is what does each of these entities charge for their water, and what is their tiered rate schedule?
Don?
Quick comment on the rate schedule. I tried to do that. I tried to get all the rates for all the entities in kind of our neighborhood. And it's just really a mess because everybody uses different tiers. Some people are on budgets, like Castle Rock's on budgets. We're not on budgets in Parker. So, I mean, some average cost of water would be an interesting number, but if you want to catalog the rates, that's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Well, we don't need to make it too hard.
No, we don't want to make it too hard.
But it'd be good to get an idea.
Yeah. As far as winter use and summer use, I mean, that's data that I know we have at Parker on an average household basis and highs and lows. I mean, it's pretty consistent, 45-50% of the water use is outdoor, the rest is indoor. I'm really trying to look at gallons per day, gallons per capita per day as a metric that we can refine and use, and that's something that we could carry across or try and carry across in all the other entities. We do talk about, there's 28 water providers in Douglas County. There's 6 or 5 more that are like Aurora Water and Denver Water. I just kind of set them aside. So when we start cataloging and talking about getting data from all these water providers, it's a pretty big task. And probably the top 10, 12, 14 or so, I mean, the ones in South Metro certainly have plans. The bigger providers, like Roxborough, they've got pretty good plans. They even have those online. But it'll be a pretty good task to fill those gaps in the end. Those would be knowledge gaps, not water supply gaps.
Jim?
Jim Morris. I'll also point out that, so we're largely, all residential down there. No commercial at all. We have the school and the country club. That's what we consider our commercial users. Everything else is residential. We had some of the best water sales years we've ever had during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody was home all day long, 7 days a week. We had some record water sales during that period of time. So again, there's stuff you can plan for and stuff you can't. Supposedly those people, if the water they were using it somewhere else when they were working, but when they're at home, we had a couple of record years.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm trying to catalog these things that are being said here because I do have a couple of thoughts we can discuss here. Don, you had your hand up?
I mean, just real quick on that, on the gallons per capita per day, Parker Water for 8 years is about 125. During COVID, it was 140. It just jumped up to 140. Last year with the rain, it dropped down to like 109. Yeah, COVID, we used a lot of water.
Frank?
Just on that 0.75 acre feet for residents, I mean, that's currently, I believe, what the county requires for development, right? They have to show they have that water supply. That isn't saying that's what's being used. And so, a lot of people are showing groundwater to meet that, which means they're using a lot less groundwater than they have allocated for them. And so that's something that's going to come out of this study. But that 0.75 is a lot higher than most residents are using now. So it's just, I don't think we need to get caught up into that while we're doing it. What we're trying to do is come up with a realistic number.
Well, I also think that what's happening is without the data that's based on what is really available and what's being used, the staff has a difficult time based on the different margins, as Harold brought up, in the different areas throughout the county. What is the right number without putting somebody in jeopardy? I mean, let's face it. There's homes that have had problems with water. I mean, there are districts that have smaller districts that had issues with water and running out and the fear of and things like that. And how do we address it? And the county has got an obligation for health, welfare, safety, quantity, and quality of all of that. And so they have to make decisions and put regulations in place that will drive all those things. And so without all of that data there and some support, it gets pretty tough for them to change anything and justify the change if they don't have the data in order to put forward. Obviously, any development can come forward with the PD, and then they can come up with a plan, a specific water plan that they can prove it and justify it. So what I'd like to do is move our discussion into something else I think is going to get us where we're at, because I'm just going to, sorry, just an observation. In a previous life, I was a capture manager and I ran the operations for all of the RFPs that went to a large technical company, period. We had literally and truly had 60 people that responded to RFPs and would help customers issue RFPs and would help us do it different ways. And we've done them a whole lot of different ways. We've seen it all. But I do like the concept because of something that says, because we don't know what we don't know. And I think we might think about it, and then the board can decide if they think it's good or not. But maybe the RFP has a proposal section that says, okay, because I've seen this done before, that says, okay, we're wanting to go out to bid for this, but there is the date that we would like to set that each of the responders can come in and say, what do you think we're missing? What do you think we should add? What does it do? What do you think? What's the change? And have a general discussion so that we can modify the final RFP and then kick it back out. I've never did hear, nor am I aware of a specific time frame that the commissioners have put on us, a deadline for a reason. I think they've got some reasonability. They would like to have something concluded in 18 months or so, probably. But I think we're not going to be done in 18 months. And frankly, there's parts of this document that go farther out. That's why I suggested we probably need chapters or phases. I think either way, both of it works. But let that consultant, we need to manage them to deliver that information. Just an FYI, it is not uncommon. I mean, for a one respondent to go out and have subs under each one, but it is also very common and quite appropriate. They need to be named, and their role needs to be specified in the RFP. The cost is the proponent's problem, because they're paying for that. All we're doing is writing a check to them. Whatever they pay those other folks is up to them, but we know what we want out of it, and we just need to manage through that. So I like that concept of having a pre-responders meeting so that we can get clarification on what we're looking for in there, and for them to also even maybe come back with some recommendations if it helps. I know there are some that would like to hurry up and get an RFP out there. I just don't know that we're ready to do that and address this magnitude. This is a huge undertaking, to be quite honest with you. That's why it really is everything that we're talking about in this document, as small as it is, quite frankly, it's going to have a lot of paper generated as a result. Thoughts? Yes. Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin Rance, Castle Pines. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Does the county follow the state's procurement code, or does it have its own procurement?
The state what? Is it on? And number one, I would raise it up a little bit. Save your neck.
Does the county have its own procurement code, or do they follow the state procurement code?
Oh, well, I'm going to leave that to legal.
The county follows state statute as required. There are requirements of the state that are not required of the county as far as procurement goes, but the county does also have, in addition to the statute, its own policies and procedures and best practices.
Okay, 'cause what you're describing a lot is very much similar to the way the construction process, where you bring bidders in to do a bid walk, right? So we want to do a bid walk, except it's okay, I've read your proposal, you're missing X, Y, or Z, and I need to answer that. So the thought that was coming to my mind is we do this typically for professional services is more an RFQ, request for qualifications, where we do the interview process and let them propose to us based on the end result of what you want, which was pretty well defined there. And I think the phased concept of this document helps support the end result of what will be in the water plan, but you could treat it separately instead of getting wrapped around the axle about the term. It's more about the process and what you want from the consultants to help identify to refine that request for proposal. Does that make sense?
Totally familiar with that process, absolutely. I like that because it's, what it's talking about with the RFQ process is basically what you're doing is you're saying, you're going to come forward and tell us why you qualify to bid on this process. We don't want to waste our time with 10 bids and then have to read 10 bids and have to cut it off and do all this stuff, especially if you want to meet state bid requirements. I think that doing a pre-bid qualification, you can begin to hone down as to who's going to have the necessary skills or thought about everything we're looking for. They'll also open up, are they really going to meet our demands, and they need to go back out. And so that's a very good point. I like that, Kevin, reminded me of that. Any questions on that concept?
Mr. Chairman?
So right now, Frank?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we'll go, Jim, we'll be right there.
So, yeah, I was going to bring that point up about the pre-proposal meeting, like a pre-bid walk, is that's where you get comments and then you can issue an addendum and then they can finalize it. It doesn't add that much time, but, do you go through the RFQ process first? Do we shortlist to 5 consultants, something like that? I mean, I don't know how many we'd want to pre-qualify, but, you get to 5 and you're in pretty good shape. and you don't waste everybody's time.
James?
Thanks. So I was just going to add that if you are kind of curious as to what the potential bidders would be proposing or thinking, you can kind of solicit that with an RFI or request for information, where you say, here's the charge we've been given, and we want to hear your ideas about how we would deliver on this charge as a contractor to us. And they submit what they think that they think we should be trying to go after. So it's just another option that's out there.
Thank you very much. RFI, different than an RFP, because an RFI is actually give us the information that you have and what you think it is, but it's not as, an RFP actually puts you in a situation of you declare a winner. An RFI gives you an opportunity to discuss it and leave it open farther. So you can make sure you've got all the information that you need, and then you can close it later if you want and get an RFQ, which is, well, there's two types, there's quote and qualifications. So you can get the quote later if you want. But we need to complicate that. The real question that we got to get to here is, do we think, I don't know if we think we're ready, I don't think we're ready to issue this as the RFP, but I do think we're ready to move forward with something, or we've got to make a decision. Let's put it this way. Maybe this document goes out and we say, let's do an RFI or RFQ with it so we can begin the process of discussing with consultants what it is we think they can provide. Roger?
Well, this is my question, Jack. What do you think it needs for us to move forward? We've got 30 minutes left, and I'm wondering what we need to do. So what is the next step then? Or could we maybe take a straw man poll to find out if others think that we're ready to RFP?
That's a good idea. Let me just pull to Frank.
Yeah, one comment, and it was actually the best process I ever worked on as a consulting engineer, was actually conducting the interviews before the final proposal as part of kind of the RFQ process. And we can send this out, say, hey, we want RFQs, and we're going to conduct interviews, and we want your feedback on this. And then you send out the final RFP after those interviews to your selected few.
Okay.
And it worked really well, because that way the consulting firms just prepare the presentation for that interview and the discussion, because the big money is spent when they're preparing the final proposal. And it's nice not to have to prepare the final proposal when they have no plan on picking you in the first place.
Harold?
Harold Smethels. Frank, I think that's good. I think it's important that we be straight up with how we go forward. I come back to my first point. I think on the water supply plan, we want a fresh look. And so I think if you're, those consultant or the consultant that really has been integral to this should not be, they should help the county, but they shouldn't be bidding on this. I think that's a game that's vitally important. And with that, I think the county staff, I have great confidence in their ability to draft the right kind of application to go out for an RFQ or initial, because we're really looking who's teaming with who and what we get back. So it would seem to me that's a good way to go, and I'd suggest we task the same three folks to work with county staff to prepare something. I like you working, Don, and come up with something. You can pass it around to us. We can give individual feedback, and let's go out and give it a try. I think you're spot on. But move it forward. But we need to know who can apply and who can't.
Okay, so what I don't want to...
My request still stands. No, my request still stands. You don't think we're ready? I'd like to know your reasons, and I think we still should take a poll or...
Right. Well, I think what I'd like to do is, that's
Thumbs up,
just what I
thumbs
was
down.
going to do, Roger, absolutely.
Before we went someplace
myself.
So what I want to do is, I want to make sure that we've had the commission, everybody's had an opportunity to speak their final thoughts before we get to that, because what I would like to do is move next, where we need to do just what Roger, I think, suggested, and is, we've got to give some direction to staff is what we want them to do on their next step. And so with that, what I would like to do is just start with Trish, and just make sure everybody has an opportunity to comment. Based on everything you've seen and heard today, thoughts?
I think Frank has the right idea. I personally think we should just take this information, go ahead and send it to a group of, I can give you the names, 7 to 10 various consultants. We can all put names together if we want or whatever. Send it out there, let them look at this, ask them to come back with the ideas. If we want to call this a request for information, that's fine, or a request for qualifications, that's fine, whatever we want to call it. Have them come back, tell us what their thoughts are, how they can approach this, what they think we're missing, then we can do the final step. I'd like to see this done sooner than later because time is ticking. We only have 2 years on this commission.
Sean?
I'll sit next, Sean Tonner, I'll sit next to Tricia. Agree 100%. I think we could take this document and shoot it out there between now and the next meeting, hopefully get some feedback, then at the next meeting, start to cull the herd. So,
James?
Jim Morris, ditto what was been said.
Kevin?
Thank you. I concur with Frank. I'm a proponent of the RFQ process to help refine before we do the RFP. We've had very good success in our municipality doing that as well.
Roger?
I have a question for Trish, because this is part of what you suggested early on. How would public comment that you proposed before play into that timing? So would we do public comment before we talk to these individuals, or if they came before, they wouldn't come before this, right? So how would that play into this?
Ideally, I think we should let the public speak before we choose a final consultant. So it seems to me that the next step would be try to have a public listening session, then talk to the various consultants that are going to get back to us, and then formulate that.
But that wouldn't delay this
I
at
hope
all?
not.
Oh,
I would hope
okay.
not.
Okay, I just wanted to make, because we all agreed that that was what we wanted to do, so, okay. I'm fully on board with this idea.
Frank?
Fully on board. The only question would be, are we going to roll the groundwater into the one proposal? I mean, do you guys agree with that? Thumbs up, roll it together? I mean,
We're going to hear what
the three of you and
hear
the
what
staff can
consultants
do
say.
whatever.
As long as they can find the right people to do the right parts of this project.
That's right. That's exactly right. Evan?
Yeah, nothing further, really. I think we're on the right track here. There are a lot of qualified consultants in the area, and if we put this forward and ask for their ideas and bring them in, I think we'll get some good refinements, actually, to this document.
Don?
Yeah, I'm generally in agreement. I think the way the groundwater analysis RFP was written really was tailored more toward like an RFI process, because it didn't really specify, hey, go get all these levels and, do things you've done in the past. It's like, please come talk to us, tell us what's new, what's modern, and how you'd approach something this size. So as long as we kind of get that in there, I think we're okay.
Harold?
I'm Harold Smethos. I generally agree with 3 caveats. Number one, I'd like to see this so that on the water supply, it is a fresh look. I think that's very important to me, and I would move that. The second, I think it should be phased to look at it in year 30, 40, and 50 to meet our plan, and I would move that. And then the third, that we come up with an overlay of where we think risk in terms of reliability and quality are. And just I'd modify this a little bit with those 3 concepts, and then I think let's put it out and see what comes back.
Okay. So I'm looking at everybody's supportive, and I go back to, James, I forgot. Sorry, just shoot me, bud.
No, all good. All good. I agree.
Okay, so James is on board. I think we've just basically got a consensus, Roger, in some way at that point in time. I think the direction, and correct me, anybody, please raise your hand, add to it or whatever, but I just want to make sure that the staff has a clear direction as to what we're suggesting here. I think number one is, I think we could go ahead and issue this document. I think as attachments to this document, you could add what Harold has recommended. It's at this point in time, it's nothing that's going to be binding. It's nothing that's going to be, we're going to be moving. What it's going to be is a search for the most qualified entities that can deliver what it is we think that the county should have at this point in time, and that's what we're doing. So if this is really only is a matter of changing a word and submitting a cover letter explaining that, it's really all that's going to be needed. And then a beginning to do a scheduling process of those that reply, then how do we get them in to have that particular conversations with them? I mean, they're going to be looking for, what do you expect us to do when we come to talk to you? And we can get to that. What kind of presentations are we expecting them to show us? What they can do, who might be involved, that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be key and important. I do believe in between that and this, somewhere, we've got to insert this, and I want to get a consensus on this public hearing thing. We talked about it, but we need to talk about it as a group as a whole. A couple of us did comment on it, so we'll be holding that for just a second. But I think it's important. There's an old saying in everything you do with government, if the avalanche starts, you're too late because you're in trouble now, because you can't stop an avalanche, Jack, let me tell you, no matter what you try. And so the best thing to do is stop, don't let it start. And so we need to go ahead, and if you're hearing stuff like that, then it's probably time to reach out and let the public have a say-so. I've had people ask me, hey, who can I ask questions of? And right now, we've been directing them to the commissioners or to another meeting, which is probably an unfair thing to do. But, Roger?
I would like to be clear about what we're asking staff to do. So in what are we directing them to direct the consultants to supply us? Is it to supply us written information, or is it to supply us a date to come present to us? What are we asking them to ask the consultants to do for us?
Right. I'm going to throw this out and make sure I didn't say it very well probably a while ago. At least what I think I've heard, trying to put it all together here, is that everybody talking about this document would be the base of the discussions.
What they're going to send out.
Send this out, and then take this particular document and say, this is our base document before we send out the final RFP. What we would like you to do is to review that document, and then from that, come back to us with your recommendation of what we may add, how we might want to re-propose this information. I'm going to tell you, every vendor, you do RFPs, you understand, every vendor out there has a different way of doing things and would recommend you do different things, okay? So we should take that into heart and just listen to them. Somebody might have a great idea as to why or what, and help us either narrow the scope, the time frame, or whatever.
You said add, so add to the document, add to an RFP, add to...
Well, as to this document, send it out. Yes, as to this document and an RFP that we're going to be submitting in the future. So in other words, this is not the final document. The question is, what would you do to improve on this? What is your recommendation? So we're really going to be asking them as a proposal, if you're going to respond to this, we would just like to hear from you a proposal on what you think we are missing in this document and what we can add to it.
To that document, okay.
Right. In the private world, you would actually have your staff just do it and send it out. And frankly, this is where we got a unique situation here, and we have to keep this in mind. That's what El Paso did. The staff just said, hey, we're running it. This is what you're going to do. That's what Arapahoe said, and Elbert County, that's what they're doing. Their staffs are running the whole gambit. We've actually have a different situation. The commissioners have asked that a board of citizens come together and help direct and give the staff some direction and some assistance in going through that process. So it makes it a little more complicated. Frank?
Is that on? Maybe. I think it's on. Sorry. Part of this, this getting their suggestions is part of the qualification process. So somebody who comes up with great ideas, we need to take that into consideration that, that happened one time with us. We had great ideas, discussion, and then all of a sudden, here's the formal RFP with all our wonderful ideas, and it's like, uh-oh, now everybody else knows what we were doing, but we got selected anyway for that. But we need to take that into consideration, that's part of the qualification. Do you guys, minimum number of proposers, can we pre-qualify down, once we get through these 7 to 10, whatever, initial 3?
So here's what I would suggest. I think we have a sub, yeah, go ahead.
It seems to me that you have decided that you're going to provide us a list of people that you want to invite to participate in this, so that you have the right people in the room and a fresh look. So this doesn't sound like it's going out in general to everybody in the world. We're going to specifically ask people,
Target them.
yeah, the list that
That's what I'm
you'll
getting.
provide. Correct? You are going to provide. Tricia just said that she would provide us the list of
This
consultants.
is why I want to be really specific, yeah.
And I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
okay.
But then we might take that list and what they submit, short list, and say, okay, let's conduct interviews 4 or 5, and after those interviews, whatever, then final proposal, 2 or 3, could be. It's like, let's get your final proposal, because that's when we're going to get the price, I assume.
Would that, Terrence Quinn, would that be the RFP process?
That would be the RFP process. that last
So we do the
step.
RFI first with the 7, just round numbers, and then we winnow that down to 3 or 4 that we invite to RFP
Yes.
based on the interviews, correct?
I see nodding of heads, but let's make sure. We'll be going around the room in a minute. Harold?
Harold Smethels. I think our sub-working group was excellent in the work they did. Would it be useful to have them be working with you and the staff as this goes out to support it? And
Yeah, I
continue
think
to
what I was
support?
getting ready to say probably would be a good idea to have a subcommittee put that together, but I would want the whole commission and every member, if you know anybody or any ideas, and even if we look at something, to submit them to the staff, who can then work with the subcommittee. And at this point in time, I probably would interject, if it's okay with you guys, to work with the subcommittee also, maybe, or if there's anybody else that wants to be involved in that process, raise your hand, and then we could move that. Sean?
Sean Tonner. Yeah, I think Harold kind of just laid it out. I think post this meeting, everyone should dust off their Rolodexes. If there's any firm that you think should be at the table, we get an Excel sheet, we send it over to staff, we send it out to the 7, 8, 9, the RFI, this document, to ask for their thoughts. I would suggest that we get it back in a electronic format so that this speeds up, so we're not doing 9 interviews over, because we're looking at 3 more meetings just to get through the RFI. So we can go through the documents as a group. From that, we winnow it down to say, okay, these 3 check the most amount of boxes. Let's send it out to RFP to them. And then we actually do the interview of those 3. That's kind of how I see it playing out.
Yeah, I would recommend too that the subcommittee is going to have a meeting with staff fairly quickly, and because I think what we need to do is provide them general direction on the cover letter to the RFP, and that general direction is what's going to drive that, because it leaves it kind of like convoluted, I think, at this point in time. So I think if we were to meet with them, we could say, okay, this is what we're looking for from you on this process here. And then we can begin to dwindle that down. I mean, there's a lot of ways to, and we can have Chris help us with that too. Just because it's government doesn't mean it has to go out to the world. It really does not. The reason is that you have to make sure that they're qualified to meet what you meet your needs are. You just have to make a record of why they are or are not. And once you have that, it doesn't matter at that point in time. So, any other questions? Okay. So, I'm going to tell you, I've been struggling with what we're going to do with this meeting. I'll be honest with you. It's like, oh, this is kind of interesting because these guys did good work. But then I know I'm looking at this and saying, but how are we getting to where we want to go? I just want you to keep one thing in mind. When I was in the group with the RP group, there was kind of a undercurrent motto we had is, you deserve what you didn't ask for. Think about that for a minute. So that means you're going to walk away and you're going to be in trouble because you didn't ask and you didn't listen to me when I said you should. So, any rate, that's why I think having a subcommittee is probably a good idea, so we can make sure we get what we want them to respond to and give us what information on how they would go by and what we need to include in that RFP to get the outcome that we're looking for in this case. We're not looking for the bid, the proposal. What we're looking for is what should we be incorporating inside of this so that we can do this, okay? Am I correct? All right, so with that, I'm looking for, I would say, a motion as to that direction. And it's kind of a convoluted thing here, I understand that. But I think what it is that the motion would be somewhere along the lines of the subcommittee would meet shortly, and then we would be able to provide the staff the ability to create a cover letter for the bid that was created and send that out so that we can begin to pre-qualify respondents is what we're doing. Yes, sir.
Don Langley, so, now I'm good?
Go ahead, Don, yeah.
Okay, all right, Don Langley. So, I mean, the subcommittee meeting before was working in track changes on a Word document that was posted on a SharePoint site. So we never really met. I mean, we sort of did. I guess we met in a virtual world. So if you're talking about a meeting now, are you talking about moving to a physical meeting with the staff, or what are you thinking there?
Well, I think it's going to be somewhat like you did before, where we had the subcommittee come together real quick and then just say, okay, guys, let's just make sure we get this put together real quick so we give staff final direction so they can send something out and get this thing rolling. I'm going to tell you, if you get past this phase, the ball's rolling, and just look out because you're not going to be able to stop that boulder.
Sean Tonner, Don, I think the main thing we're adding is Harold's comments. Maybe we just add that into the document. I think they're kind
Yeah, I
of,
also-
we'll add those. And then I think it's collectively, everyone here shooting in names of firms that we would like to be included in the RFQ. And then this document's like 99% there.
Yeah.
Because they're going to come up with a lot of things to add, hopefully, ideas. And that's when we'll come back and say, okay, here's the RFP. We like this from that group, that from that group, and yeah.
Yeah, okay, I see that. I also heard about a cover letter, though, because I think a cover letter is going to be really important, right? So that whoever's receiving this RFI, I'll call it, has a sense of what we're trying to do and what we're looking for, and who to talk to, you know, if they got questions, those kinds of things.
It's more of kind of like maybe an executive summary or, if I would, a scope of the bid is what we're going to actually submit out and have them respond to, I think, from that, Don. Frank, you had another comment?
I was going to make a motion that.
Before we do that, can we do one thing, please?
Okay.
I really want to make sure, based on the direction we've been talking, is everybody, I just want to see, and get nods or whatever, does everybody understand what we're doing? I've seen nods across the board, except the staff, they look like, we're going to talk about that in a minute. So, yeah, okay, so with that, I think we've got and then we're going to then shoot for the motion. Please pay attention to the motion because we can obviously ask for amendments to the motion if we think it's missing something. So Frank, fire away. You may want to.
So I move that the existing subcommittee of Tricia, Sean, and Don revise this, slight revisions to address what Harold requested and, you know, other issues with the two RFPs into one, if that's what, you know, we've kind of agreed upon, and then draft up a cover letter and work with the county on issuing the cover letter and the draft request for proposal. That is my motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have discussion? All right, I'm going to force discussion. I want to make sure we're good here on record. Trish, where are we at? You good with that motion?
I'm good with that motion.
Sean? Jim? Kevin? Good. Roger?
I'm good with it, but it's incomplete. We don't direct you what to do with with this letter and cover letter. That we're going to direct you to, obviously, send it to a list of consultants that we are going to provide for you. I'm not sure that necessarily needs an amendment, but I want that on the record, that we are going to provide you with a list of selected consultants that you are going to send that to, and then provide that information back to us.
I accept that.
So that is part of this. So, but I am good with this process.
Harold? Don?
So we're at the 5-yard line now? Is that?
I don't know where we're at, but we're somewhere.
Do you not see the cheerleaders, Don?
Yeah, so I'm good, other than I'm not sure what, how we handle this notion of a fresh look in the cover letter or in the document. I'll give you some language, okay.
Evan?
I'm in favor, although I think the last word he used was request for proposal, and maybe it should be a request for interest or qualifications and interest, something like that.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Frank, you good?
Good.
Okay, now this is the dangerous part. Staff?
One point on fresh look. I think the fact that you would be providing us the agreed-upon list of consultants will make sure that fresh look is integrated, that concept is integrated into that list. Is that something that the subcommittee and the committee itself can agree to? Very good. So I assume that'll be the fresh part.
Okay.
Well, if I can comment on that just a little bit, I think that's also part of what we're asking them for. We want to hear what they think a fresh look is. I think that's going to be kind of pivotal to their proposal. If they don't have a perspective that's a fresh look, they probably aren't our guy, right?
If I may continue, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please.
I believe we were talking much earlier in the meeting about folks that have not been integral or integrated into
That is true.
county policies, and I think in part, at least, that's where Fresh Look comes from.
That is in part as well, correct.
Before James?
All good.
Okay, thank you. I'm not forgetting about you, but I did. Hey, Trish, did you have something? No, you okay? I just saw a look of inquiry. Okay, so we have a motion, and I believe we have a second. Somebody? Harold, second? Okay. And with that, then, at this point in time, we've had discussion. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Abstentions? I think we're good to go with that direction. And then the next thing we're going to have to do is look at our calendars and figure out how many of the subcommittee members can meet very quickly to come up with this. And then if you don't mind, I might just inject myself to participate in that and see if I can provide any assistance from history of RFPs and bids and all that world. Franks?
I just have one question. Who are you working with currently that would not be allowed to submit on this RFI?
Okay, why don't we just hold that question? It's a great question, okay? But I think we want to hold off on that question right now. Okay, thank you. I'll explain it later. Okay, thank you.
If I could,
Yes,
just to
Chris.
clarify, as part of the open meetings, I think this, and this has been discussed, I think this executive committee or subcommittee is going to be meeting in similar fashion. When we say meeting, it's not going to be a physical face-to-face meeting. Staff is likely going to provide a draft cover letter and, again, the draft RFP with their changes. But I think we should clarify how that's going to proceed.
I appreciate that, Chris. I think the motion was that the committee was going to provide us a draft letter. So, but we can share it very similarly like we did the last document.
That's what I mean, is the process here is going to be similar. Maybe not necessarily how it starts, but the process will be similar. It will be virtual. It will be drafts going to staff making sure everyone's seen those drafts, maybe a shared document. There will not be a physical meeting with a posted notice that the public can come attend. Just want to make that clear.
Sean?
Sean Tonner. Yeah, we can take the cut at doing the first draft of the letter like we did last time, and then hack it all up. You guys will see it, and then we can clean it up and get it out.
Hack it.
Okay. So we're good to go on that section? All righty. One other thing, this public meeting thing or having a meeting where we're allowing the public to come in and asking them for their input, I think is something, let me, as we set the agenda here and we look at the agenda going forward, if it's up to you and okay with you guys, I can work with staff on prepping that because that's going to have to be a separate arrangement. And it's a lot different than the way this meeting here was structured would work. So, because it's almost like an open house, but it's not. It's just going to be allow for public input on that. So if you hear anybody ask you about what's going on, just remind them there's a public hearing coming. Keep your eyes out, and there'll be something coming on that. And I do agree. The worst thing you can do is try to hide this stuff and not talk about it, because then people. Well, when you do that, you give them the license to think the worst. So you got to get it out in the open, put the light of day on it. Okay. So let's, I don't have anything else on our agenda right now on this item, so I'm going to go around. Oh, Sean?
And I also look at staff. Should we maybe in the future, kind of to get to that point, have a part for public comment? No, at our meetings? No. Gotcha. Okay. Just having a town hall meeting would be better, more focused.
Let's not call it a town hall meeting at this point, but let's
whatever,
call it
yeah.
I like the idea of open house.
Right.
And something we'll invite the public in to speak about
Okay.
these issues. Otherwise, we want to keep this as an advisory board. Right. Okay.
And part of the thinking on that is to make sure that we're cognizant of everyone's time. The more we invite the public in, the more time we're going to need for each of these meetings. So, but if we understand the need maybe to give them an outlet, so maybe a specific meeting for that purpose would be the right way to do that and still efficiently run the meetings.
My only issue with
Roger,
this.
go ahead.
Thank you. My only issue with this is I hate to limit scope, but like this one is completely about talking about the plan, the water plan. And I don't know that everybody that comes is going to want to talk about what needs to be in the water plan. I think people are going to want to talk about water. And I hate to shut anybody down. And I think being able to limit scope is always an issue. I'm hoping staff would maybe be able to give us some guidance on that. Or we come up with some ingenious way that someone is able to just talk water. That's difficult to do.
Any other comments? Okay, so seeing none, I think we have those two items discussed today, and I think we're moving forward on those. Please give us your list if you have a list. Don't forget that. That's a homework and a to-do item. Second thing is, please be sure you review the work that the committee did, the RP committee. It was really great. Keep an eye open, watch your emails, and we'll get that going also. James, I don't know if you have any more comments, but if you do, you can scream it out. If not, you good? Nope, he's good to go. Okay, staff, any closing comments?
No, sir, well done.
Okay, with that, I'm going to have to adjourn this meeting today at 4:49. All righty, thank you very much.